So today we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about boxes and cubes and some of the basic concepts that we need to know. So there's a lot of times when people will start with my class and I'll have them draw a cube, and even though we have been exposed to more perspective, which is what a box is a term that's referred to as perspective, which means how are objects viewed in three-dimensional space. And so I'll have people go, look, I know that this is wrong. They'll come to me with a drawing that looks somewhat similar. Now, I've had some that are worse than this, and I've had others that are a little better. But they'll say, look, I know this isn't right, but I'm not sure how to fix it. And so, like with anything, and with drawing as much as anything else, knowing how to fix it is really going to decide how successful it's going to be. When we see a problem, we can fix it. It isn't a problem anymore. If we can't fix it, well, then it continues to be a problem. So the first thing we want to understand to fix this box is we want to talk about what makes something 3D. Now, 2D shapes, whether they be rectangles or squares or triangles or circles, they only have height and width. They're 2D. They've only got those two things. They've got height and they have width. And so that's what makes something 2D. They have no three-dimensional space. They're completely flat as a pancake, like my piece of paper. All right, so only height and width. Now when we have a 3D shape, well, now we have an extra dimension. We still have height, we still have width, and now we have depth. This guy's kind of stuck in here a little bit, but we've got depth as well, which is, the height, is how high it is, how wide it is, and then how far back does it go? That's depth. Now sometimes, if you're sending a UPS package or something like that, or some sort of package, you'll see something that says height, width, and length, which would still gives you the depth. But I like to say height, width, and depth instead of width and length. I prefer the height, width, and depth. But any sort of object that's 3D has height, it has width, and it has depth. So that leads us to this little mantra right here, this little code or this little secret decoder might be a better way to say it, but this is what all 3D objects have in common. And if something is wrong, is because it does not conform to these rules. So the first thing is that anything that's supposed to be 3D, like this supposed box, I say a box because it's not quite a cube. It looks like it's a little wider than it is deep and stuff like that. So it's not quite, like a cube. It's actually more of a box, like what we'd send a package in or something. So again, we have in this, for any 3D object, any sort of box, any sort of any sort of cube that we're trying to draw, we have to remember that we have three sets. We have height, width, and depth to make it 3D. And so we have three sets of lines. We have height lines, we have width lines, and we have depth lines. So we have three sets of lines, and anything that's a box or a cube has to have those three sets. The next thing is that in each set, we need 3 or 4 lines. We'll talk about why we might have 3 versus 4 a little later, but they at least have to have, in each set has to at least have 3. So that would mean we at least have to have 9 lines. If it's 4 lines to a set, well then there's 3 sets of 4 lines. That would be 12 lines. Very rudimentary math. So with this drawing that we have right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines, because we have 3 sets of 3 lines in this drawing. The last relationship of the lines in each set, so all the height lines have to be parallel. All the width lines have to be parallel. All the depth lines have to be parallel for it to be correct. Now I have another video where we're gonna talk about front views versus corner views, we're really, really boiling down a much longer conversation in perspective and trying to simplify it, sort of the graham cracker or, sort of, very, very, very simple sorts of stuff. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So we're going to go ahead and, when I say parallel, I mean two lines that don't converge, or in other words, they do not come together. Okay, so these two lines, for the most part, aren't getting closer together. So this is what we want. These two lines, and maybe I should make these darker so they can be seen. For the most part, are not getting closer to one another. These are parallel. What you don't want are lines that are getting closer together like this. You don't want that. That's a big no. And we don't want them where they're opening up either. We don't want that either. We don't want this. We don't want that. What we want is this right here, where they're staying pretty much equal distant apart, or parallel. So when we're drawing this, we need to look and ask ourselves if these lines are conforming to those rules. And they are not. But before we get much further, we have to identify what lines are what. Because if I don't know which are my height lines, my width lines, or my depth lines, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and label the vertical lines, or in other words, the height lines, as family A. Now, no one ever gets these wrong. This is the only family that everyone gets right, because it's very easy for us to see the height lines or vertical lines. Those are always very simple. So that's that set. That set is done if we're keeping it to the 3-line standard. These 3 lines are all in the height family. Now, this is supposed to be a cube seen from a corner view, meaning it's going to have 2 angles going either direction. And we'll show you this. This, however, only has 1 diagonal. We're going to talk more about that later, but this would be a front view, and what we're going to do down here will be a corner view. And that will probably make more sense in a second. But first off, let's start talking about the Y. So the Y gives us all 3 angles. If I look right here, this right here is my height line. Let's just go ahead and clarify that, like so. This over here on this side should be my width line, right? So let's go ahead and, oh, I missed that a little bit. Well, I dropped the line a little bit. This is where they meet. So this is my width line, and this over here is my depth line. Height, width, and depth. So people will refer to this as the Y. Look for the Y. The Y always has all 3 angles. It has height, width, and depth. So if I was looking over here, here's my Y. Look, the arm has straightened out, but that right there would be my Y for this little cube. There's my height, there's my depth, there's my width. Okay, so for the family over here, looks like I drug my hand through this pencil, so I got a little muddied up that line a little bit. But let's just go ahead and say, okay, if it's on the left, we're just going to call it B. This is just for notation. Anyone that's having some really bad flashbacks to geometry, please just bear with me for a second. This is just a simple notation. This set is different than that set, and this set is different than the either two. This right here, if it's on the right side of the height line, we'll call it C. So there's our 3 sets. We have the family of A lines, the family of B lines, and the family of C lines, or set A, set B, and set C. All right, well, that's perfectly simple. Now let's go ahead and put the other lines in this cube, or actually it's a box, it's not a cube. So if I come down here, hopefully it's very easy to see or to understand that this is the second B line. This down here is B, and this down here is C. So this line here needs to be parallel to that line there. Now, sometimes it's hard to, when it's really short, to see if this line is parallel. If that's ever a problem, make the line longer. Once it goes longer, it's a little easier to see if this line is getting closer or if it's opening up. It's opening up a tiny bit, but here's where it originally was. And now this is where it's more parallel, this is where it will be. So it was opening up just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and say, all right, well, this right here, and we'll make that line nice and distinct. Okay, so this line and this line are now parallel. All right, make this a little bigger. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with 3 sets because this right here has our 3, and instead of 4. We'll go ahead and talk about 4 in a minute. But we've corrected this line that was wrong because it was not parallel to the other depth lines. So now these 2 are parallel. The problem is now I have to find the 3rd line that's going to go, where this is, the 3rd line in this family. And so to find that 3rd line, we're going to have to look, to where it's going to be going. Grab another pencil here. So to find that line, what we're going to do is we're going to look for we're going to use what's called an upside down L. Now this L doesn't have perpendicular angle. It's actually going to open up a little bit. But this L points the way to the 3rd B. So B comes off of this corner right here. And as we see this line, it's opening up. It's not parallel. So what we're going to do, now I could do this by hand, but to make this nice and clean, let's go ahead and get this line in here. Okay. All right. So now we've got B, B, and B. These 3 lines are now parallel. So we have these 3 lines are right, and these 3 lines are right. In fact, let's go ahead and, well, I'll do that in a minute. So we got all 3 of the B family. Those are now correct. Now we need to find the C family. So again, if I need to, we could take this out a little ways, take this out a little ways. But I think we can pretty much, get this lined up so it's pretty close to parallel. So we'll go ahead and take this. There we go. All right. So that's that little dot I made is the corner, in case you're wondering. Now we can go ahead and just straighten these out. We'll just go ahead and straighten this out a little bit, straighten the other one out a little bit. So let's go ahead, make sure this is parallel. If I throw that pencil down, it's easier to see if this line is parallel to that line very quickly. Okay. All right, so that's now parallel to that. And again, we can check and make sure that this line and that line are parallel. I'm just using a little drafting triangle. Again, I do these by hand and then I can straighten them out. But to be more clear on this, so we can be super clear on this, I'm just going ahead and making sure they're nice and perfectly straight. All right, so this part down here is all correct. So it's still, it's out of whack down here. So again, if we need to see where's my 3rd C, again, we could use an upside down L, top to bottom, and then again it opens up, that L opens up and points the way to our 3rd C line. C is right over here, and it comes off of this corner. Okay, so we use that upside down L, points the way. And so we're going to go ahead and we're also going to erase that now because we don't need it anymore. It was just to identify the lines. Okay. And so now I'm going to go ahead and come over here and try to make sure that this line and this line are parallel, pretty close. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come off of this corner where C starts. It comes off this corner. And we're going to bring it over until it crosses, because where those two cross, that's the back corner. And you can see we've got a box here. I told you it was how it was a little bit wider than it is deep, and it is. We can see it very easily now. Okay, so this is now a correct box, and so we're just going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit for our box. Okay, and so once again we can go ahead and darken these lines as needed, like so. A little squeaking with a pencil. We're going to go ahead and draw this line a little darker, get this all nice and cleared up. Okay, so now we have something that, again, because it conforms to 3 sets of 3 lines that are parallel, we now have a box. It looks like a box, and it looks, you know, the lines are all good and straight, and so that's what we needed. We needed something that conformed to this. You know, this is our standard. This is what has to happen on any cube or any box. You have to have 3 sets of 3 or 4 lines that are parallel. We're going to talk about that 4th line now. The only time we have that 4th line come into play is if this is transparent. Like right now, if this was opaque, like made out of wood, where we couldn't see it, this would be fine. But what if it was made out of glass or plexiglass or something like that? Well, then we need, each set has to have a 4th line. Well, each corner has an A line coming down from it except for back here. So that would be where our 4th A line would drop. Now I'm going to make this line checkered. And that's just a drafting notation to say, hey, this is a wall that exists, or this is a corner that exists, or a line that exists. But it can't, it's an invisible line. And it also just helps us not get too confused. Because if our eye starts to see that this line is the same as these lines, it can cause all kinds of illusions for us to assume we know what we're looking at when we actually don't. So this is A. This is our 4th A line right here, our 4th vertical or our 4th height line. We now need the other 2. We need B and C. Let's do it this way. Let's go. Okay, this is parallel to that. That's C. Okay, think of a ribbon. The ribbon comes up. The ribbon comes over. There's our upside down L. The ribbon would drop down, and the ribbon would come back across the bottom. So that means that we know, or you could do that this is parallel, and this and something down here would have to be parallel, whichever way makes more sense. The line that's going to go in down here will be our 4th C line. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it is parallel. Again, I can take that, put that down, make sure that it's parallel. And it looks like it's you know, maybe opening up a little bit, so we'll just go ahead and change. There we go. That's pretty close. The other one was pretty close. Again, I am drawing flat, so that means I'm drawing in perspective, which is something you do want to avoid whenever possible. But this is just, you know, it's very easy to do things that are drafted like this. Now this line should stop right about there. Again, I skipped it, which is that's the danger when you start doing the checkered line. So we'll just put that back in. Now this goes too far, so it stops at that corner. So we'll just erase that off. Okay, and this right here is that back corner, and this is our 4th C right down here. So we have C and C are parallel, this and that are parallel, and this and that are parallel. And again, if we think about it as a ribbon, we can follow that ribbon around the box, down the back side, across the underside, and it's easier to keep in our mind which is in which family. So we're going to do the last line in the B family. We only have 3, and we need the 4th one. So it'd be B, B, here's our ribbon, B, then the ribbon would come down the back, then hit B, and then it would come back across. So our B line is going to be somewhere down here. So we go ahead, and again, we could take this and check that out to make sure. Now it looks like something was a little off because these are converging a little bit. This shouldn't be converging. So something got a little bit off. But it's close enough. Hopefully you understand. If I want to, I go, oh, nope, we're going to make that perfect. Well, then we'd straighten that out, and we'd start double checking. One of these, most likely this line is the one that's out. And, so we could go ahead and, if I want to, I could check that out. Or one of these is off, so it's one of those two. But anyways, it's close enough that if we go ahead and connect this, whoops, it's supposed to be checkered, but it's close enough. It's kind of on the borderline. It takes a lot for angles for our eye to go, nope, that angle's wrong. This one's close enough that we can kind of get away with it, but it's not perfect. And again, I've moved the corner to right here, which means this has to move, so either this was out, but I don't think it's this one. I think it's actually the back corner. And I think I actually moved it from when they actually crossed. I think I moved this a tiny bit. Or this one is just not straight up and down. Yeah, there we go, there's our issue. Okay, so somehow when I was drawing this, I got this a little out. It's not straight, it's not vertical. That's the problem. That would move this over here, and that would change the angle of this to then, anyways. So there's a little bit of funkiness here, but understand that, if I can get even close to drawing something like this, you'll be like, oh, that looks great. But whenever we're drawing a box or a cube, we're always looking for something that has 3 sets of 3 or 4 lines that are parallel. So this has our 4th set, so now we can see all 12, of our lines. Do we have to have it that way? No. And if it's like, well, all these letters are starting to make my brain, kind of, seize up a little bit, well, then we can just lighten it a little bit, get it out of there. No big deal. This was just to help us in the drawing of this thing. We could go ahead and, again, lighten it up. But this was just to let you know what the, how we would do the 4th line. If I wanted to add the 4th line on here, this line, the easiest lines are always the straight line. So the straight, the straight vertical line. So we'd bring this down, and then we'd bring this straight over. This is not straight because this is not a front view, but there's, like I said, a video where we'll talk more about that. And then we can go ahead and put that in. And now we can, again, we'd have all 4 lines in each set if we've done that. So it was very important that we understand that whenever we have boxing cubes, we always have a 3D object. So we're dealing with height, width, and depth. And that leads us to this, that every set, all the height lines, we have height lines, width line, and depth lines. So we have 3 sets, height, width, and depth. And then in each set, each one of these sets has 3 or 4 lines. And the relationship of every line in the set is their parallel. All right, so I want you to think about that. I want you to try to draw this type of box. But I want you to watch the other video where we talk about drawing boxes. So there's a part where we talk about drawing simple boxes. And so I want you to hold off for now, but watch that other video that talks about, it's detailed about how we break them down and how we draw them, and we're using the 3 sets of 3 or 4 lines that are parallel. But after you've watched it, I want you to draw 3 types of boxes that are corner views and 3 types of boxes that are front views. And again, that video will explain it even better. And we want to start getting used to drawing boxes without sweating it. It's not that big a thing. Once you get used to it, in the beginning it can seem just overwhelming, but once we get used to, okay, yeah, is this set out, is that set out? No, all the sets are pretty close. Then we should have a good box. And so again, that's one of the biggest hurdles with your drawing, is trying to get really good boxes. And we use boxes in all kinds of ways. So it may seem, you might be like, what am I going to use a box for unless I'm drawing a present? We modify the box all the time in drawing for intermediate, advanced, and even basic drawing, all the way up to the most advanced drawing as well. You use boxes all the time, and we'll talk just the basic fundamentals in this class. But if you stay in the classes, we'll start talking about how we get more and more and more into modifying the boxes into cars or motorcycles or bicycles or buildings or houses or barns or you name it. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing here. Go ahead and, again, watch that other video on drawing simple boxes and cubes, and then try and go ahead and give me 6 boxes, okay? And yeah, get used to starting to draw these 3D boxes and cubes, and it will help you immensely with your drawing. All right, y'all, take care. Bye-bye.